I'm an alcoholic. My name's Gordon Rail.
Hey, Gordon.
I really appreciate being here with you all. I sometimes worry about wearing out my welcome. I hope not. Y'all have an awfully fine group of Alcoholics Anonymous here, and I appreciate being with you. I never want to get behind one of these podiums without being respectful to Alcoholics Anonymous and its people, family members as well. I hope when this evening's over, you all will know that I take the program seriously and I take you seriously, but I've learned I don't have to take myself so seriously any longer. I believe laughter is healing, and I've cried enough, and I suspect y'all have too. So I love to laugh. I didn't know what AA was all about, but the laughter was sure appealing to me when I tried to find my way into AA. It's kind of crazy. They smoked in those days, and I went in this room, and there's men hugging men and women hugging women, and they're drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes, and everybody's talking and nobody's listening, and they're cussing and talking about God all at the same time in a church basement. You know, I don't know what this is, but I was sure glad to be there. I've taken an inventory in this program, and I probably stand here and speak to you from that perspective, from having done a fourth and a fifth step. I haven't had to go back out after I did that. I'll tell you about playing around with this program a little bit and trying to do it my way, and I can tell you about those half measures. But anyway, since I've done the inventory and tried to do the steps of this program, I've been able to stay here. And like Waylon, in the beginning, I did it because I had to, and all of our literature says that if we'll do it for a little while, that it'll start to feel right, and I do it now because I like the kind of life that it brings me. It's just taught me how to live comfortably. Not ashamed of being an alcoholic. These steps took care of that for me, helped me to park that someplace, unhooked from it. And the guilt and the fear and all the things that I was carrying around with me, that's what these steps do. Make me able to live comfortable in my own skin and not regret my past nor wish to shut the door on it. And I don't approve of alcoholism, but I certainly can't accept it, because now I know why what happened to me happened and how it happened. The book of AA and the wonderful members of AA have explained that to me. So I couldn't accept it until I could understand it. And now that I understand it, my name is Gordon, and I'm an alcoholic. I never was a bad person needing to get good. I was a sick person needing to get well. And I'm grateful for that. Okay? Now, I was born in Siler City, not too far from here. And back in my time, I'm 72 years old. So back in my day, my mother died recently. I could run all over Siler City when I was 5 years old, and, just all over town and go home by dark and, whatever. But my mother passed away a few years ago, and she had my report cards from school in a bundle with a ribbon tied around them. And I pulled out my 6th grade report card, and it said, "Will not pay attention, will not follow directions." And that's the story of my life. Stealing from a good friend, Bill C. from Greensboro, he said that we came along before riddling. They had paddling, and I spent an awful lot of time in the school hallways, and one thing my attention span was about like that of a gnat. So, I couldn't, I didn't get along real good. So, now I played sports when I was young and up through high school, and that was enough to keep me away from alcohol. Back in my day, if you smoked cigarettes or drank, they would throw you off the ball team. So being on the high school football, basketball, baseball team and playing American Legion ball during the summer was enough as far as my ego and, wearing that monogram jacket around school, I suppose, and, it was enough for me. Then I went away to college, and I scared to death. I can to this day almost remember when my parents dropped me off and left that Sunday evening. I'm going to tell you that my stomach, just a hole in my stomach. I was scared to death. But I wasn't there long before somebody said, "Do you drink?" And of course, I thought, what do they think I am? Some hayseed from the sticks? So I said, well, yes. And so we went over to a tavern in Dunn, North Carolina, a little place called Doug's. And I'm a quick learner. I watched them, and they ordered a Miller High Life beer, and I ordered one. So I'm glad it was dark in that place. That stuff's coming out of my nose and eyes and ears. And they say, "How you getting along?" And I said, "Just fine. I'm doing great." And so I was, to be a part of the crowd, go to any lengths. And so I've been a phony all my life, just, pretending, a chameleon, if you will, to try to fit in as best I can. But it wasn't long before those guys and gals, college gals now, from Raleigh and Southern Pines and big places, were saying things like, "Let Gordon drive. Gordon can handle his beer. You can hardly tell Gordon's been drinking." Well, my head blew up so big I couldn't get it in the car hardly. But it was such an affirmation or a pat on the back to me that it sounded to me as if I was doing it right. And, and those people wanted me to be with them. They invited me to be with them, and so it was a good time. Anything, you better have a wonderful, people say you must have a wonderful program to get me away from those memories because, those were good memories. So I probably was in trouble long before I got in trouble and was heading for this place a long time ago. But for several years I got along with some significant things happening that I really didn't pay any attention to at the time. I was in a real serious automobile accident near Sanford and broke my leg real bad, and I was in the hospital 3 months and didn't walk for almost a year. And we were drinking, the driver, myself and another fellow. And anyway, I was hurt. Well, I didn't blame that on alcohol, and didn't slow me down a bit. And so when I went back to school, people treated me like a hero, sort of, and I dragged that leg around. I was walking with a cane, and if you don't watch me, I'll drag it around tonight. Along about that time, a lot of my friends were getting married, and I'd met a girl, and we got along pretty good, and I'd gotten a little money out of that automobile accident, and so we got married. But I can't manage money. You see, I left home without knowing some pretty important stuff. I didn't know anything about managing money. Only thing I know about money is when you run out, you need more. And I don't worry about it till I run out, So we moved to Winston-Salem so I could get a job and go to school, and we were expecting our first child. And so I'm working on a truck dock at night, making a union wage, going to school, baby coming, and I would stop people on the street and tell them that I was working and going to college and raising a family and making more money than my father made. If you wanted to hear it or not, I'd be glad to tell you. And so I wouldn't tell you that about every 6 or 8 weeks I had to go borrow from my father. And I'd go down there in my Siler City, and my dad, I'd get mad at him on the way down there because of what he was going to say. He'd say something like, "I thought maybe you had come to pay me for the last time when you you said you would. And you know, of course, that was just my inheritance, the way I looked at it, and I was just getting an advance, you know, and I don't know why he was giving me all that grief. And then he would ask me, what do you think the problem is, son? And I'd say, it's that woman, Daddy. She wasn't raised the way we were. Now, that was in the 1960s. In the 1990s, my wife Jo and I were sitting at my mother's dining room table, and something came up about my ex-wife and children, my first, you know, the mother of my children. And my mother reached over and patted my hand, and she said, yes, son, but she wasn't raised the way we were. So the point is when you plant those seeds, they just keep on, those weeds, they just keep on growing, you know. And so my wife Jo looked over at me and she just shook her head when Jo and I met in Alcoholics Anonymous in Wilmington, and we've been married, I believe, 32 years, and I'm very, very grateful for having Jo in my life. A lot of good things have happened to me that couldn't have happened if Jo hadn't have been my partner in this journey, and so I'm very, very grateful for Jo. I've messed around and got out of school and got a good job with that same trucking company. I worked on the dock, and I'm in Winston-Salem, and I'm the best job in the company to be in the home office. There were 200 and some salesmen that wanted to come to Winston, and I got that assignment, a very plum assignment. But it wasn't long before I wanted to leave Winston, and I told them, I said, I want to get some field experience. Now, the reason I needed to leave is that being under that kind of microscope in the home with the big, you know, the big bosses walking around the town or whatever, and I'm writing bad checks, and my life's getting a little ragged. And so I did what I know today is a geographical cure, and I went down to Florence, South Carolina, and I did just like I always do. I made a great beginning. You know, I start fast, you know, but if you hang around, it's going to get tacky, because I'm going to get tacky. I got no staying power. You know, I can make a good first impression, but, you know, I don't hold up. I've started many things and finished few, you know, in that old life. So anyway, I start off like a house of fire, and trouble really started my way. Now, I'd already had trouble in Winston, I told you. My inventory revealed that, for example, I got stopped in Winston-Salem one night driving without any headlights on. And the policeman didn't want to get me in trouble because I was a student, and he just let me go. I got stopped another time out on Interstate 40, and this time, when I was pulling out my driver's license, a Sheriff's Association card came out of my wallet. Now, I don't know where I got it, but there it was. And the sheriff who stopped me, deputy, he had his friend, his other sheriff, drive my car, and he drove me home. Third time, not so lucky. I'm on Interstate 40 out near Kernersville back in the day when it looked like a space highway. Sometimes you could be driving 70, 80 miles an hour and not see a car in either direction. But a highway patrolman stopped me. Well, I'm going to make a good impression, so I give my turn signal to turn off on that, you know, that place there where you can change tires and whatever. And when I pulled off the highway, I pulled into weeds up to the windshield. I'm going the wrong way on the interstate highway. First, I knew about it. Now, that explained why those people had been blinking their lights at me. And I'd been blinking my lights back at them and giving them a hello, you know, like that. Well, as luck would have it, the highway patrolman had to go to a 2-week school, and he suggested I go to court while he was out of town. And even with that, he let me park the car he said, don't move this car for 4 hours. And he gave me a ticket, but not for drinking. And so, you know, there I have three times I should have been, you know, should have had consequences. but I didn't. And of course, if you got the kind of ego that I have, well, that just played right into it. Those were just bragging stories, you know. And so I didn't learn it all, of course. Well, in South Carolina, I started getting in trouble that I couldn't get out of. I paid my way out of some things until one day I got one that I couldn't pay off. And now I'm getting ready to lose that job because I'm a traveling salesman. Now I'm already having a world of trouble. I couldn't leave home until the mail came in the morning, or I couldn't leave town. And when you're a traveling salesman, you can't travel until the mail comes. Because you see, I have bad checks, and I have credit cards that my wife doesn't know anything about. I've got all kind of things going on. And my day for me at that time would be to get up real early and go in, and I got 3 kids by then, go in and start a breakfast. And about the time I get it almost ready, I wake her up and out the door I go, because I know she's got chin music and I don't want to hear it. I'll talk to her this evening, you know. And so out the door I go. Now I go to my office and nobody's there, and I check my desk to see who's looking for me, and then I check everybody else's desk to see what they got to say about me. You know, I'm just fumbling through everybody's, and I leave before anybody gets there. And then I go to a little country service station store and I hide my car behind it, because my wife has had to return to school, teaching school with those 3 children, because I've got our finances in such a mess. Such a mess. And she drives by with those kids, and I'm standing in the wash bay of that service station with a suit on, drinking a beer at 7:30 in the morning. And then I can go back home. And then I'll call 5 or 6 of the real good customers, let's say in Orangeburg, South Carolina. And I'd say something like this: if you need me, I'm in the area, but I got a big day, and if everything's okay, I'm okay. And they'd say, oh, fine, Gordon, everything's fine. I'll say, and I'll get you those tickets in the mail to the football game at Columbia or the Masters Golf Tournament or whatever. I really appreciate your business. Now, my thinking was, if the company was looking for me, that they'd call one of those customers, and they'd say, oh, yeah, he's been down here since early this morning. Now, I'd usually call the office and tell them I had a big day planned, and they'd tell me they needed to see me, and I'd pretend I couldn't understand what they were saying. I'd hold the phone out with the traffic, pay phone, and tell them I'd see them this afternoon. And then I would go and manage somehow to get enough money to buy some booze and maybe go to the country club to hang out or hide out, whichever you want to call it. Back then, now I realized I couldn't stand to be by myself, and I would have to go somewhere, to be somewhere. So around 5 or 5:30, I would go back to a pay phone and call the office and tell them I was about 50 miles out of town, I'd had a real good day, and I'd see them first thing tomorrow morning. And they want to talk with me, and I say, I've got to get home tonight. I won't be able to stop by the office. And then I'd go buy enough booze for the rest of the night, and I would go to my subdivision, if I was real lucky, and ride around and around and around. I wouldn't go home. And I wouldn't go down the street I lived on, because I didn't want my kids or, by chance, my wife to see me. But I'd ride around and around. I couldn't go home. When I finally went home, that wife would say, you've been drinking, and I'd hold up a pint with about 1 drink out of it, and I'd say, I've had a hard day. And you all know I had a hard day. I'd been drinking and hiding and, really, very unhappy with myself. And promising myself tomorrow's going to be different. Tomorrow I'm going to do a good job. Tomorrow I'm going to do better. And so I'd fall asleep in an easy chair. Sometimes I'd set it on fire with me in it, smoking cigarettes. Just pour beer on it. One time, the fire smoke detector went off, and my wife comes down the hall, and so my remedy for that was to pull the wires out of the smoke detector. I came here, and I'll give you some more evidence, I hope, about a higher power. I had no thought or concern about my wife or those 3 children, and at all. I've lived there and gone 4 or 5 days and never seen my children awake. I would come home at night after they'd gone to bed and leave in the morning before they got up. I'd go in their bedroom sometimes late at night and sit and look at them. And I'd say to myself, what in the world is going to happen to us? What in the world is going to happen to us? So when I finally got that DWI that started to tumble, so that facade or that phoniness was hard to keep up. I couldn't keep it going anymore. I went away to a place called Hebron Colony and stayed sober about 90 days, I think. And then one day my wife asked me to leave, and you know what the feeling was? Relief. I'm sorry to say that to you, but so I left town on a bus, and the next 5 years were horrible. I lived from Florida to Delaware and in between. I was in a couple of very serious automobile accidents. My inventory tells me I had 28 jobs in that 5 years. Now some of them I had 3 times, but I was a mess. I was a mess. I would had to go back and forth to my mother and father's house a few times when I would, completely get worn out and worn down, and had to escape. And go there and hide. They didn't want anybody to know I was there, and I didn't want anybody to know it either. I'd long ago hidden from my growing up friends because you see the way I was raised, a man's supposed to get married for life, forever. And you're supposed to be a person that is well respected and take care of your wife and children. And I didn't have, my credit standing was shot. I had no credit. I had no driver's license. I had no job. And I wasn't allowed to see my children because of my behavior and the fact that I wasn't paying child support. So I was a zero, a loser. And so I just hid. So, and the other thing I did during that time that I regret was that I wouldn't leave my children alone either, or my ex-wife. Nothing romantic, but I would interfere with their lives time and time again. I would move close to where they were to make a new start. And of course I would, about the time that they started depending on me a little bit, I'd mess it up. So I was in and out of their lives, and just absolutely, it was all about me. Thought about myself. I didn't think about their welfare at all. Now I know this is a family illness, and there's no doubt in my mind that wife of mine would, before we separated, I'd come in at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning and see the curtain move in the living room, dark living room. She'd be sitting up, waiting on me. Now, when I got in the house, she would be in bed pretending to be asleep, and I'd tell her how you do, whatever, and she'd fuss at me for waking her up. I'd call her a liar. I just saw you in the living room. She'd call me a drunk. Well, with that, I'd go out to the den maybe to have one more beer and turn on the world news in case they needed me for something. And the TV'd be right hot. It hadn't been turned off 10 minutes. So with that new information, I'd go back and argue with her some more. Now, I know today that she wasn't in that living room because she wanted to be in that living room. She was in that living room because she could not be in that living room. The worse my drinking got, the worse things got for her and her fear. She knew she had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. She knew that. But she could not worry. I could not drink, and she could not worry. The illness of alcoholism affecting people that don't even drink. My mother, I told my mother I was going to tell this story as long as I lived. And she said, "Oh, Gordon Jr." When I would be living in their back bedroom, my mother would had to carry her pocketbook around the house every minute of every day, and she had to sleep with it. And in it was her money, of course, and checkbook and credit cards and prescription drugs. She had to have that stuff with her. When she went to the clothesline, she had to carry the pocketbook. So she put on the long high-heel shoes that matched the pocketbook when she went to the clothesline. Because we got neighbors that have been there for 30 years. And her thinking was, if someone says, "Helen, what are you doing at the clothesline with your pocketbook?" she would say, "I was just on my way to town and I almost forgot these clothes." So she had a story that nobody ever asked about. But it was sort of funny to see her out at the clothesline day after day with her pocketbook and her high heel shoes. I kept hoping she'd forget it, but it never happened. It never happened. So we laughed. What happened to me, though, is my dad came one day when we'd had a horrible experience. My mother tried to keep the car keys away from me one night, and their car keys, by the way. And I started tussling with her about the car keys, and she held them behind her back, and she fell in the den floor, and she almost hit her head on a fireplace, but she didn't. And I'm still trying to get the car keys, and she's kicking and screaming and hollering. And my father came out the bedroom and sees this, and he hit me with his hand as hard as he could hit me. And I heard him crying, saying, "What has happened to my family? What has happened to my family?" And I heard my mother say, "Sometimes I wish I'd have never had you." So I just walked away from home that night. And the next day, my dad met me when I came home, and he said, "Son, where do you want to go?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, he pulled out $100, and he said, "You can't stay here anymore. You're killing your mother, and I've got to take care of her." So no telling what I said to him, but you all know I took his $100, and he drove me to the bus station to leave town. Well, I went for several months without seeing them, but I ended up with the geographical doings that I went through for a while longer, and I ended up in Whiteville, North Carolina. Let me tell you how I found AA. My God is a big, big God and a very personal God. I'm on my way from Raleigh, I believe, to Whiteville to go to court about my child support, and they had lost their sense of humor. They were not, I had to go, and I knew I had to go, so I'm going. Now, I'm driving without a driver's license. It makes you nervous when you're like that, so a little drinky poo will help you along. Just a little sedative. And so I stopped at a restaurant in Lumberton to get me a chaser, and I went in the restaurant, and the waitress is leaning over with a bunch of truckers, and she's gabbing and won't wait on me, so I beat my money on the counter. Well, when she got over there and got my 7-Up, I made a comment that she might look for another line of work. She wasn't much of a waitress. Went out, poured half that 7-Up on the ground, and made my drink. And 2 miles later, highway patrolman stopped me. He said, "You're really not driving bad, but I've had a phone call about you." Well, now, as soon as I get this little misunderstanding straightened out, I'm going to go back and burn that restaurant. Well, he took me in, and I blew 28. Now, I wasn't drunk. I just pickled. I drank all the time, It impressed him. He said he was impressed. But he locked me up anyway. Well, I spoke to the jailer a minute and I said, I need to make my phone call. And he said, I'll be with you. And I said, no, you don't understand who I am. I need to make my phone call. Well, I made him so mad, he didn't let me have the phone for 3 days. Can't do that. Violated my rights. So now I got to burn that place and sue Robeson County. And I finally got out of there and called the attorney in Whiteville and explained my bad breaks and misunderstandings. And he agreed. It was horrible. And he said, come on down. Well, I must have been a little rum-dum or, whatever. I thought he was sincere, so I showed up at his office. And I ain't even sat down good before I heard a noise and looked back, and there was a deputy sheriff as big as the doorway standing there. And I stood up to go out the back door, and one came through that door. So now I got to burn the place, sue Robeson County, and kill this sucker. I'm having a hard time. Went to the magistrate, and he knew me from better days, and he said, Gordon, if you'll just give me some money, we'll get this straightened out. I said, you can't get blood out of a turnip. And he said, I'm not locking up a turnip, Gordon, I'm locking you up. And I said, you got to do what you got to do. Well, when I got in jail down there, I went on a hunger strike. That didn't last long. But they threw a guy in jail that had gotten thrown out of a halfway house for drinking in the halfway house. And I picked his brain. I'd never heard of a halfway house as smart as I am. And it sounded good. Better than jail. So I copped a plea to the attorneys, and they let me go to the halfway house. And I go on a Saturday morning, and that evening they said, okay, everybody be in the van by 7. And I said, what's going on? They said, we're going to AA. I said, oh, no. I didn't sign up for A&A. And they said, no problem, Gordon. You get on the van, we'll drop you back by the jail on the way to AA. And I said, whoa, don't be so hasty. Can non-alcoholics go to AA? They said, tonight you can. It's called an open meeting. When I walked into that A&A meeting, you ain't going to believe it. It was in the church I was married in. When they pulled up in the yard, I wouldn't get out of the van. They told me I had to. Are y'all picking up on the arrogance of the desperate here? I'm the only guy in the world laying flat on my back looking down my nose at other people. And so I walk in there, and there stood a county commissioner walking toward me and a very prominent businessman, and I thought, oh, well, I've done it now. I've done gotten a men's Bible class. And here they've seen me. I don't know if any of you had to ride off one of them vans, but there ain't much to that, when you get off a van from a treatment center or somewhere, and you get like jailbirds or something, So they handed me a cup of coffee, and one of them said, we've been waiting on you. We've saved you a seat. We're glad to see you here. I thought I knew those guys. The county commissioner had been sober 15 years, and the prominent man, the wonderful, fine man, businessman, very wealthy man. He'd been sober 9 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I stayed in Whiteville there for 2 or 3 months, and they taught me the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. They walked it and talked it and shared with me. And as soon as I got those legal things off of me, I decided that I needed to go to Delaware. And I would stay sober in Delaware. But I didn't stay sober 2 weeks once I got to Delaware. I had a good job offer in Delaware. I stayed up there about 6 or 7 months, the worst drinking I've ever done. Sometimes I could not tell night from day. I'd have to wait to see if the street lights were coming on or going off to try to get my bearings. It wasn't long before I wasn't welcome anywhere. I would walk in a pretty nice lounge or a bar, and the owner would walk over and say, how you doing, Gordon? And I'd say, I'm fine. He'd say, you been drinking? I'd say, 2. He'd say, well, have this one on me, and then move on. I don't know about your drinking, but the demons in me, the devils, my personality change is I was not good company. I just no telling what I'm going to say, when I'm drinking. In the beginning, people would say, if you're going to have a party, invite Gordon. And now then people are saying, if that guy's drinking, stay away from him. He's trouble. He's trouble. So I called the guys in Whiteville that had tried to help me, and they told me to go to Wilmington, and they would try to help me. So it took me a while to get on the bus. Sometimes I'd go down there so drunk they wouldn't let me on the bus. Sometimes I would go because I would think it was 6 in the morning, and I'd get down there and it was night. And so I finally got on the bus and I made it to Wilmington. I went to a halfway house that is still there today called Stepping Stone. It was formed by Alcoholics Anonymous members. They formed a nonprofit, and that's where it came from, and that's what it was. It was a halfway house where 6, 8, 10, or 12 AA members stopped by every day to drink coffee and talk, and there were 3 meetings a week held there. And we got on a van and went to meetings 7 nights a week from the halfway house. And I met a wonderful man, and you guys here in Southern Pines had a lot to do with him. His name was Harry Jackson, and he got his sobriety here. And he was, boy, I don't know, God was good because he gave me Harry, and Harry had all the patience in the world with me. We would sit on a rock wall till 11 o'clock at night. Sometimes I'd come down the stairs and Harry'd say, how you doing, Gordon? I said, I've been thinking. He'd say, oh, hell. Your thinking's what got you here. And he would take me through that. Sometimes he'd say, how you doing, Gordon? I'd say, I'm fine. He'd say, why don't you go tell your face? You don't look fine. And, he just messed with me. And went to a meeting one night, a discussion meeting. Some people call them opinion meetings, and Harry said, Gordon, I want to ask you to help me with something. And I said, what, Harry? He said, I've been talking too much in the meeting. When it comes my turn tonight, I'm going to say, my name's Harry. I'm an alcoholic. I've come to listen. I pass. Now, I've already decided what I'm going to say, so I can go inside and listen to every word that's being said and not be getting my talk together. I looked over at him and I said, Harry, I'll do that too. He said, would you? Harry had 10 years sober and I had 10 days, and he was trying to, to calm me down, slow me down. I was whining one day about my lot in life and the way things were horrible and one thing and another, and he said, what are you doing? I said, well, what do you mean, what am I doing? And he said, how about riding to the hospital with me? He stopped about halfway to the hospital and he threw $1 at me and told me to go inside and buy 2 packs of those cheap cigarettes. And if you got $1, he said, buy 2 more packs. I said, I've got $1. I went in and bought 4 packs. We go over to the detox, the 7th floor of the hospital where they kept the alcoholics in a locked ward. And they let him in because they knew him, and they let me in because I was with him. And he handed me the cigarettes and asked me to give them away while he was taking care of his business. And I said, what do you mean give them away? I don't know anybody up here. And he said, neither do I. I said, well, how do you do it? He took them, he went to the first door, the door was open, there was a man sitting on the side of the bed rocking. And Harry said, how you doing? And the guy went, mm-hmm. He said, do you smoke? And the guy went, mm-hmm. He said, you got any cigarettes? And the guy went, mm-hmm. He said, regular or menthol? So I snatched the 3 packs back from him, and he went about his business, and I waited on him and talked to those folks in detox while I was waiting. And on the way down across the parking lot, he said, Gordon, what was it you wanted to talk about before we came over here? And I couldn't remember. He had shown me gratitude. He didn't talk gratitude. He made me experience gratitude by putting me through that deal. Now, what if I told you all that he pulled that deal on me twice before I caught on to what he was doing? Okay, and he took me to the prison, and he introduced me to the chairperson of the correctional facilities, before correctional facilities, but the outside sponsor. And he told me he'd probably meet me back there next Friday night, and he never came back, and I went for 3 years. He took me to the detox where they had a meeting on Sunday nights, and he introduced me, and I made that a regular meeting as well. So he got me into service. That's the only thing that got me out of myself. That really did. And I'm sure that's why I'm here with y'all tonight, is because I just got real active. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did it. Because he said do it. And I respected him. See, I didn't believe in his program of recovery, but I knew he did. Because he walked the walk. He was very consistent. He and a lot of other people were that way. And so I knew they believed in their program. And the kicker was that they acted like they believed in me. I didn't believe in me, but they acted like they did. So they say you got to live your way to better thinking, and I drank one more time briefly, and I went back to Harry with a big book under my arm, and I said, Harry, I'm having trouble with step 2. And he said, hell, you don't understand step 1, but I'll help you. And he took me through the steps, because up to that time I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't pray when nobody. I wasn't doing any morning devotion. I was just ducking and dodging. I was staying sober on the power of the pack, so to speak, trying to make A's in AA. A good friend of mine gave me a Grapevine article written in 1984. It said it works if you work it. It hadn't come out at that time, but he knew my story, so he thought I'd appreciate it, and I did. I do. I still have it. It says it works if you work it, and here's the way it goes. It said, we come into Alcoholics Anonymous looking for a way out, and some of us start looking for a way out of the way out immediately. We're not willing to go to any length, but we are willing to go to any length to make you think we're going to any length. It said phonies are like that, and that was me. I'd been phony all my life. I didn't know any other way. See, I thought I was doing okay if you thought I was doing okay. So that's the way I operated, and in here it didn't work because we stay sober contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And I found that in the steps for me. A spiritual understanding that was sufficient to me. But when I came back from that last little drinking, I knew I had to pursue a spiritual understanding that would be sufficient to me and personal. Because I couldn't believe that I drank after those several months of real good living. I'd been reunited with my children. I'd been reunited with my parents. Things were looking good. I'd started sparking with Jo just a little bit. She didn't know it, but I was sparking anyhow. So couldn't believe that I drank. So I knew I had to pursue this spiritual understanding, that I couldn't sit on my butt and wait for it with osmosis. So he took me through the steps. And the 12th step says it very, very plainly, and Harry showed it to me, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. So anyway, with Jo and I were married one Saturday morning, and we had 70 or 80 AA friends, and her children and my children, and my parents. We went to the Tri-Area Roundup that afternoon, and tomorrow we're going to go down to the Crystal Coast Roundup, which is a thing that they've started, I guess, in memory of the Tri-Area that no longer there, hadn't been for years. But we went to a conference on our honeymoon, and we moved to Greensboro in 1985, and stayed a couple of years, and went back to Wilmington for a year, and then back to Greensboro, and we've been there ever since. When Joe and I went back to Wilmington from Greensboro after 2 years, I am just convinced that the halfway house needs me. I mean, you know, I'm an alumni and all of this. And they don't even look my way. They invited Joe to get on the board of directors at the halfway house. Well, that was hard to take. We needed a job. During those days, Joe made far more money than I did. She was, you know, did accounting, and she always, you know, she could always get a good job, and did. And by the way, during those years when I was paying that child support, they were coming out of a bank account that belonged to she and I, and she let me write that child support check every month for years out of that bank account without saying a single word about that. And so she was my partner and my helpmate and all of that. So she stayed there one board meeting, I believe, and came home saying they need a manager in the women's halfway house. What do you think? Paid almost nothing. God. Sure. Sure. Gotta look after her. I'm scared to death. She loved it. She stayed there a year, you know, doing that, driving that van, taking them girls around, just had a wonderful time. Well, because of that, Joe was invited that 1 year. She was invited to go to Fellowship Hall as a family counselor because she had that little bit of experience. And she had been a wonderful volunteer at Fellowship Hall for years. And they gave her that job, and she stayed there for 10 or 12 years as a family counselor. What was so good about that is that Joe had followed me around and supported me and been my cheerleader, and now she got an opportunity to do this, and it was really wonderful for us. So Tom I asked me about coming to work for corrections, and I spent 14 years with the DART program, and I never had a job that lasted anywhere near 14 years. You know, never did, never have. Enjoyed that tremendously and met some wonderful people, and I'm very glad that I was a part of that effort. Very proud of what was done. Very proud of that. Now, from not long after I got sober, I have made a living working with alcoholics, and I don't apologize for that. It's been wonderful. I don't know where else I could have been. But I will say to you that I live because of Alcoholics Anonymous. Working my job is not my program of recovery, never has been and never will be. Here with you is my recovery, you know. But I'm very grateful. We're winding down a little bit. Joe has retired, and I'm working 5 hours a week. I have a cousin who worked her butt off, went to the University of North Carolina, became a nurse's supervisor, and finally became head of the nursing school, and all kind of good things happened to her and through her. She deserved every bit of it. And one day we were sitting on the sofa, and she said, all you ever did was drink liquor and screw up. And you've ended up with the same retirement I have. She said, there's something just not right about this. And she loved me, and she was very proud of me. But she said, I worked all my life, and you just went here and yonder and everywhere. You know, here you go. So anyway, I don't know what else to say except to tell you that the best thing in the world that ever happened to this alcoholic was Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're new here, my wish for you is that if you will do what is suggested by the people who care about you here, it won't take long before you will know that you're feeling better about yourself than you have in a long, long time. And you're doing better. So Bill Wilson wrote in a Grapevine article, in the beginning we do what we do because we're going to die if we don't. And then he said there's a second plateau, and that one is we do what we do because it's the right thing to do. And then he said there's a third plateau, and that's the one we've all got to go reach for. He said we do what we do because we like the kind of life that it brings us. And the proof of the spiritual experience is very simple. I have thought of a drink many times since I've been sober, but I've never been able to tell myself that it makes sense. I used to be able to tell myself that it made sense. And now, if and when I ever think of a drink, I can say, whoo, not no, but hell no. Where did that come from? And now, maybe I'll say, wonder what I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing, or wonder what I'm not doing that I shouldn't be doing. There's got to be a reason for me thinking that alcohol makes sense, because it doesn't make sense. Not for me. So I have a defense against the first drink, that I never had before. And this program is far more than that. It's a program of living. So thank you for having me, and I wish you the best.